So now, what are your plans for the pandemic and opening of schools? What do you think about that?
Well, I got a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, I am concerned because children carry a lot of germs. And I'm not as concerned about the babies as I am about our senior teachers, our elders. We got a lot of elderly black women, who are near the age of retirement, who we don't want to be exposed to those fresh young germs that the young people may bring. Our children have immune systems that are strong enough in many cases kind of fight a lot of that off. I'm still concerned for them too, but I'm really concerned about their teachers. Those 50-year-old sisters, those 60-year-old sisters who are hanging around because they love teaching our children in a classroom with 30 children who could all be potentially bringing the virus in. So you're looking at 30 different strands of corona, in the same classroom with a senior, and I don't want to see any of our elder queen mothers have to deal with that. So that's one of my biggest concerns. On the other hand, and when I've been on your show in years past, Elder Dave, I've talked about that there was always a war to end public education. Don't be surprised if this pandemic becomes the justification for the extermination and elimination of public education, because there's a lot of people who've been trying to close down the schools, and this is giving them a good opportunity to do so. I do see President Trump pushing back, wanting to demand that the schools open up, but you know where that's coming from. That's big business. They want to make sure they have their employees back so they can get their corporations up and running again. So that's why Trump is pushing, not for the kids, but for the workers.
Federation of Teachers.
So, the corporations are breathing down his neck, saying if you don't send them kids back, the parents won't be able to come to work, and that's going to affect our bottom line. We need production, and we can't get it without our employees. But on the other hand, you have other folks who are saying, listen, half of the white people in this country don't send their kids to public school. Half of the white people in this country don't have school-age children. The U.S. Constitution does not require us to pay taxes for public school. Why not just kill it? And what we see in Philadelphia, the school district of Philadelphia, and we're seeing this around the country, fellas, they're looking at a mix right now from what I see and what I've been reading and what I've been hearing. It looks like it's going to be a mix of in-school and online. So you might come to school the first month and then do your work online the next month, or you might be online 3 weeks, in school 1 week. They haven't quite come up with the system yet, but it looks like it's going to be a mix of at home and online.
Wow. So it doesn't seem like the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, is too fond of public education anyhow.
Exactly. Now, speaking of that, I don't know if you gentlemen saw the latest Supreme Court decision, which I believe was Montana versus the State Department of Revenue. I believe it was Montana. Check this out. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled about a week ago that voucher money, because we have a school voucher money, Betsy DeVos and Trump are big fans of that, where if you don't want to send your child to a public school, you can find a private school and just take the money from the public school and send it there. Obviously, that's to help destroy public education as well, because you're defunding it. But up until now, that money could only go to non-religious private schools. Because, in America, we have a separation of church and state, and the state cannot fund religion. Well, guess what? The U.S. Supreme Court ruled last week that you cannot stop a parent from taking their public school voucher to a religious institution. So now the religious schools can accept public school voucher money. And I'm telling you right now, that was a serious victory for the enemies of public education, because now you're going to have a lot of religious people who are not in support of vouchers, who are now going to start supporting them because that money could come to their church. Public school ain't going to be around much longer anyway. It's not a question of will they kill it. It's only a question of when they will kill it.
So you mean like the Catholic schools?
Yes, Catholic schools can take the voucher money, or any independent private religious school. Let me give you an example. Okay, Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey. Let's take us in Delaware. we will have a bona fide religious curriculum. African traditional spiritual culture, we will teach that. The Yoruba system will be our foundation because that's what I practice. So even though we're independent with a bona fide religious function, if a parent in Delaware, let's say Wilmington goes to the vouchers, or any district in Delaware goes to voucher, and they say, I want to take my child's public school money and send them to the Dr. Umar Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. You see now, even though we're independent, we could get the money as an independent. But even if they argue, they can't go to his school because he has a bona fide religious curriculum there. They're taught traditional African spirituality. That is a violation of separation of church and state. Not no more it isn't. Now they can send their child to my school, and we could accept that voucher if we decide to do that, even though we have a bona fide religious function to the school or spiritual function to the school. And the reason we have that, Brother David, is because the zoning of the school that we own only allows charter and parochial.
Wow.
I'm not a charter school. So to operate, I must have a dedicated aspect of the school's operation, curriculum, and function that is dedicated to religion, and in our case will be E5, traditional African spirituality. So we could, in fact, accept the school vouchers. Given them allowing religious schools to accept public voucher money, that just opened up a whole new can of worms for people who are against vouchers. Now it's going to be, and again, that's why Betsy DeVos was put there anyway, to destroy public education. But now the Supreme Court just helped her tremendously, because up until now, religious schools cannot accept vouchers.
It could also be an avenue for more students to attend your school, though, because they have a reason. Absolutely.
If we decide to take them, I would probably have to have an attorney go through that with fine print, because one thing about that public school money, here's where the religious schools got to be careful.
Got strings attached.
Here's where the religious schools got to be careful. If you accept public funding in your school, at least this is what I was taught in my educational law class, okay? If you accept a single dollar of public funding in your religious schools, you are now obligated to provide any public school mandates that the feds require. So, unless they changed it, if a child comes into your school and they are in special ed, they have an IEP for autism, mental retardation, learning disability, ADHD, whatever the case may be, they have an IEP. If you're accepting federal money, you accepting voucher money, technically that parent can make you provide for that child's special education services. And that's where the money is no longer a benefit, because that little bit of voucher you're getting may be nothing compared to what that child's special ed expenses may be, especially if they're blind or deaf or have a physical handicap. So that's going to be the next great war, because what's going to happen is these religious schools are going to accept some of these public school kids. They're going to show up with IEPs. The religious schools are going to say, we don't do IEP. The parent going to get a lawyer, and the lawyer going to say, because you took federal funds, public funds, you now have to provide the IEP. That's where all this is going to lead. There's going to be a big fight over whether or not these private schools and religious schools that take school voucher money, do they have to provide special ed services to disabled kids? That's going to be the next big fight.
So, what's the what's the downside of accepting IEP students?
Because their needs may supersede your budget. Let's take a hypothetical. The school district of Philadelphia, let's say the regular ed kids get about $10,000 a year. Just maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So Brother David has a son who is autistic and ADHD, even though ADHD don't exist, but that's what he got. He's autistic, he's ADHD, he got speech and language, and you bring him to my school. You bring him to the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. I accept him. I accept that voucher. The voucher is $10,000. But then you show me the IEP. I've already accepted him, so I can't kick him back. That's discrimination. You cannot discriminate on the basis of a disability. Then you say my son needs speech, my son needs autistic support, my son needs this. And when I add up the services that I'm going to have to, even though he only getting speech once a week, he's getting autistic support 2-3 times a week, He's getting his ADHD, behavioral modification and counseling, blah, 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 twice a week. When I add it up across 180 school days, it costs more than the $10,000 I'm getting for him.
The state won't reimburse for that?
Oh, here's the question. That's another good question. If the religious or private school takes the special ed kid, they got their $10,000 in voucher money from the school district of Philadelphia. Can that religious or private school also demand that the school district of Philadelphia not only give them the $10,000 regular ed reimbursement, but I want the other $10,000 special ed reimbursement?
Mm-hmm.
You see how that's going to get kind of funny? Because the school district is not going to want to give that up, even though that child is no longer in Philadelphia. You see, so let's say the court say yes. If they're at that school, the special ed money can now go to. This is going to be a big mess because I really don't see public schools and activists and elected officials. I don't see them letting all of that money, the regular ed money and the special ed supplement, go into private and religious schools. That's going to be one hell of a fight. But I think the religious schools would win it because if I'm educating the child, why am I not getting his special ed supplement as well?
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be something because they're opening up a whole new can of worms and they're really blurring the line between the separation of church and state. Because you're saying now religious schools who don't have to follow the rules can accept the money. But as I said earlier, will they also be forced to follow the rules? Because the way they can counteract this, Elder David, is make these religious schools and private schools follow all the rules, which could end up meaning that it's costing them more than what they're getting. So a lot of them might decide to stop taking the voucher. I think that's going to be the way that the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, the two largest unions, because they have a lot to lose from this, Brother David. If those kids start going to the religious schools and private schools in droves, you know what that means? The classrooms are getting empty.
That's right.
The classrooms are getting empty, which means